It was already September, yet Guangzhou was still sweltering enough to make people curse. Qiange tried to make herself as small as possible, hiding in her cubicle. She bent down and reached into the drawer to pull out half a small watermelon. She had brought this watermelon into the office with great effort. Before it completely succumbed to the scorching heat, Qiange decided to let it have a dignified end. But just as she was about to take a bite, a booming voice rang out. Qiange. Her hands shook involuntarily, and the tempting slice of watermelon fell squarely into the trash can she had prepared for the seeds, landing perfectly, green rind facing her helpless expression. There was only one person in the office who called her name with such dramatic flair. Sure enough, when Qiange looked up, she saw the punchable face of Lu Jingyun. Lu Jingyun, if what you're about to say next isn't important, you won't live to see tomorrow's sun. Whoa. Why do you look like I just slept with your boyfriend? Lu Jingyun glanced at the trash can in front of her and immediately understood. Impressive, my dear Ge, sneaking snacks in the office. Enjoying life, aren't you? I didn't get to enjoy it. Qiange threw a tissue over the body of the fallen watermelon. What do you want? Spit it out. Lu Jingyun waved a package in his hand, and Qiange noticed the EMS logo on it. What's that? Your contract of servitude? No, it's yours. Lu Jingyun squinted at the writing on the delivery slip. It's from Beijing. Old Qian, do you have any enemies in the capital? It's so thin. Could it be a lawyer's letters? At the mention of Beijing, a name immediately flashed through Qian Ji's mind. She snatched the package from his hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she tore it open. Aren't you going to check what's inside? Lu Jingyun asked, lounging nearby as he watched Qiange suddenly freeze. Then, without hesitation, he took out the contents of the bag. If it's really a lawyer's letter, you'd better run. Holding her breath, Qiange watched as Lu Jingyun pulled out an envelope. Whoa, could it really be a lawyer's letter? Lu Jingyun seemed more anxious than Qiange and opened the envelope without hesitation, ignoring the fact that he was tampering with someone else's mail. What is it? Qiange already had a guess when she saw the envelope, knowing only one person who used such envelopes. Still, she asked, she hoped it was a lawyer's letter rather than, it's an invitation. Lu Jingyun casually flipped open the card. Huh? This must be some kind of joke. The invitation doesn't even have the bride and groom's names, just the time and place. Qiange slumped into her chair, unsure of what Zhou Jiaxu was playing at. If he was going to send an invitation, why not write down the names? Staring at the handwriting on the invitation, it was unmistakably Zhou Jiaxu's. How many years had it been? This was the first time Zhou Jiaxu had reached out to her since she left Beijing, and it turned out to be a wedding invitation. Qiange had come to Guangzhou at the end of 2012. In the past 4 years, her body had been in Guangzhou, but her heart remained in Beijing. Qiange rummaged through her bag for her phone and dialed a number. It rang for a long time before it was finally answered. Well, little dove, what made you finally call your big sister? Qiange didn't have the energy to joke around and got straight to the point. Who is Zhou Jiaxu marrying? Shinju was stunned by her abrupt tone. Little dove, by the sound of it, you're not planning to start a fight with the bride, are you? As soon as the words left her mouth, Qiange realized how harsh her tone was and tried to soften it, though she doubted Shinju would understand. That's not what I meant. I received an invitation today, but it didn't have any names on it. Neither does mine. Actually, I didn't even get an invitation. Zhou Jiaxu just told me in person. As for who the bride is, I didn't dare ask. Qiange laughed at that, didn't dare ask. It seemed what had happened back then left quite the impression on Shinju, so much so that she still carried some trauma. Back in the day, Zhou Jiaxu would always walk around with a cold expression, ignoring everyone. Seeing him like that, most of their classmates steered clear of him. Who wanted to be friendly with someone so unapproachable? Except for Shinju, who was fearless. She'd hide behind a math textbook and observe Zhou Jiaxu's every move. When she had the chance, she'd run over to ask him questions, though her intent was far from academic. Eventually, Shinju stopped going to him. At first, Qiange kept asking her why, but Shinju refused to say. When Qianga finally cornered her, Shinju relented and told her what happened. Qianga nearly died laughing. Shinju, bless her heart, had asked Zhou Jeshu the same math question 3 times. By the 3rd time, he'd had enough and coldly replied, "You clearly lack the intelligence for math. That was Zhou Jeshu for you." He had a way of crushing you with his intellect, completely unaware that he had already driven the other person to fury. To him, he was just stating the facts. "Little dove, will you come?" Shinju asked softly. Qianga raised an eyebrow. "Of course I'll go. How could I not?" "Good." Shinju breathed a sigh of relief on the other end. As long as Qianga said she'd go, she felt reassured. Qianga had no idea what Shinju meant by good, but she was definitely going. After all, it was Zhou Jiashu's wedding. Even though, once upon a time, she thought she would be the bride. "Classmate, can you help me call Zhou Jiashu from your class?" Just as Qianji reached the classroom door, a girl stopped her, holding a pink envelope in her hand. The girl had long, flowing hair, with clear, bright eyes and flawless pale skin that was flushed with a blush, looking quite stunning. Qianji couldn't help but marvel internally. Yongha High School really was full of beautiful girls. "Do you need something from him?" Qianji asked casually. The girl blushed even more and nodded slightly. Qianji glanced at the envelope in her hand, turned around, and walked into the classroom. She saw Zhou Jiashu sitting at his desk, head down, writing. "Zhou Jiashu, someone's looking for you outside." Zhou Jiashu raised his head, glanced expressionlessly at the door, then stood up and walked out. As he passed Qianji, she grabbed his sleeve. "Hey, be nice." Zhou Jiashu frowned and gave her an innocent look. Not even 2 minutes later, Qianji had just sat down, her chair barely warmed, when she saw Zhou Jiashu already back at his desk. Qianji turned to look out the window. The long-haired girl had her head down as she left, discreetly wiping her face with her hand. "Zhou Jiashu, what did you say to her?" Qianji immediately slid over to him. "I told her I was busy," Zhou Jiashu replied, continuing to write furiously. "What did she say to you? Why do you ask so much? Have you finished your exam papers? Your grades are always at the bottom, and there's a monthly exam this week. Shouldn't you be more concerned about your scores?" Zhou Jiashu showed no interest in gossip and even lectured her righteously. Qianji immediately shut her mouth and slunk back to her seat. Any longer, and she would be shredded by Zhou Jiashu's scolding, reduced to dust, impossible to piece back together. "Sister Shin, why do so many girls like Zhou Jiashu when he's so aloof?" Qianji finally asked the question that had been nagging at her during class break. Although Shinju had her own trauma from Zhou Jiashu, she had grown close to Qianji. He's handsome, plus that cool, indifferent demeanor is really attractive, Shinju said, looking starry-eyed at the lean figure sitting in the front row. "He's also really smart. Our future kids will definitely be geniuses." Qianji couldn't help but purse her lips. "Cool? Ha ha ha." She clearly remembered Zhou's mom once chatting with her mother, saying, "Yurenji is so considerate and well-spoken, unlike my silly son. He barely talks, standing there like a telephone pole." Shinju protested, "Don't laugh. Zhou Jiashu is practically a god to us girls. He's the kind of guy who always has a spotlight shining on him wherever he goes." Qianji nodded but couldn't agree less in her heart. "And gee, does Zhou Jiashu have a crush on you?" Shinju suddenly asked with a hint of sadness. "I've noticed he treats you pretty well." Qianji snorted in response. "Treats her well?" She recalled the time she slipped and fell flat in the snow, and Zhou Jiashu stood by laughing so hard he almost couldn't breathe, but didn't offer her a hand, and he constantly stole her eggs. Knowing Zhou Jiashu all these years had been the most unfortunate thing in Qianji's life. "Sister Shin, have you ever seen a photo of your Prince Charming wearing split pants?" As expected, Shinju's eyes lit up instantly, like a hunter who had caught the scent of prey. Why isn't Zhou Jiashu's name on the list? Qianji dragged Shinju through the crowd to the honor roll and stared for a long time, but couldn't find Zhou Jiashu's name. Given his usual top 5 ranking, could he have dropped? They even checked the bottom of the list, but still no sign of him. Back in the classroom, Qianji saw Zhou Jiashu. Zhou Jiashu, what did you score? I don't know, Zhou Jiashu said, his face unruffled. How could you not know? Qianji reached out to grab the test paper hidden under his books, but before she could pull it out, a classmate shouted, "The teacher's coming." She quickly sat back down as the chubby homeroom teacher walked up to the podium. Our class did pretty well in this month's exam. Some students made significant improvements. The test wasn't difficult. We've practiced most of the question types. If you had been more careful, you could have done even better. But the teacher paused and changed his tone. One student deserves special criticism. The teacher glanced around the room before focusing on the front row. Qianji felt a jolt. Could it be Zhou Jiashu? No, there were so many students in the front. It couldn't be him. Zhou Jiashu, what happened in this exam? The teacher's face turned grim. Zhou Jiashu stood straight, his lean back silhouetted in Qianji's eyes, but his voice was unwavering. I didn't cheat. Didn't cheat? Then why was only your name recorded by the proctor? Why was the answer sheet in your hand? The room was eerily silent, not even a whisper. I didn't cheat. It was the same 3 words, and the teacher's face darkened even more. Teacher, I believe Zhou Jiashu didn't cheat. It must be a mistake. Qianji stood up from her seat and looked the teacher straight in the eye. Mistake. The teacher pounded the podium in anger. The proctor found the answers on his desk. Are you saying the proctor framed him? I didn't want to believe it either. My star student wouldn't stoop to cheating. But the evidence is right here. Cheating will be on his record forever. Teacher, Qianji stubbornly defended him. Even if the whole school cheated, Zhou Jiashu wouldn't. You can give him another test. The teacher looked at Qianji for a long time before finally sighing, everyone sit down. Sigh, when I first heard about this, I couldn't believe it either. My top student wouldn't need to cheat. I'll talk to the principal about it again. Thank you, teacher. Qianji stood up and flashed a bright smile at the teacher. After school, Shinju ran up to Qianji. I heard you stood up to your homeroom teacher for Zhou Jiashu? I'm impressed. The same person who usually shakes in her shoes at the sight of the teacher actually spoke up in front of everyone. So brave. All for love. I'm a fan. What was all this nonsense? Standing up to the teacher? For love? Qianji felt drained. Sister Shin, I didn't stand up to the teacher. I was just stating facts. Whatever you say, I just love your willingness to fight for love. I'll leave Zhou Jiashu to you, Shinju declared grandly, and Qianji decided not to explain further. As Zhou Jiashu walked by with his bike, he gave Qianji a glance, hesitated, but didn't say anything. Qianji quickly waved him off. No need to thank me. I was just standing up for justice. Zhou Jiashu hesitated for a moment. I think you really are a bit dumb. Qianji was instantly fuming. Wasn't this the infamous good intentions mistaken for a donkey's liver and lungs? Qianji, are you having braised pork tonight? Remember to bring me a bowl, Zhou Jiashu said before riding off, leaving Qianji alone in the wind. Meanwhile, Shinju was still drooling over Zhou Jiashu's departing figure. So handsome, and he likes braised pork too. Qianji couldn't help but sigh toward the heavens. Was there anyone around her who was even remotely normal? In the cafeteria, Shinju angrily poked at the scrambled eggs with tomatoes on her plate. The one who framed Zhou Jiashu is from our class. Damn it, and he's even got the surname Shun. A disgrace to the Shun family. Who was it? Shun Jianan. That despicable man. Shinju fumed. I heard it was because of Zhong Qiqi. Turns out our class belle also liked Zhou Jiashu but got rejected when she confessed. The beauty was heartbroken, so Shin Jianan, to avenge her, slipped a note into Zhou Jiashu's pencil case and then reported it to the teacher. What a scumbag. Shun Jianan? What does he look like? Qianji asked. Shinju curled her lip. I used to think he looked decent, with glasses and a scholarly air. But after this, every time I see him, it feels like he's assaulting my beautiful eyes. Next time, point him out to me. Shinju nodded. Sure, just don't forget to call me when you beat him up. Qianji had barely taken a few steps when she felt a tug on her hair. She instinctively grabbed her hair, the pain making her want to curse. Turning around, it was Zhou Jiashu. Zhou Jiashu, are you crazy? She and Ji snapped. Zhou Jiashu looked at her, then reached out and lifted her hair on the right side. She and Ji tried to stop him, but it was too late. Her swollen eye was revealed. No wonder she hadn't tied her hair up these past few days and had been avoiding him at school. Zhou Jiashu's eyes narrowed. What happened? She and Ji stepped around him, trying to leave. I fell. Do you think I'm as dumb as you? Zhou Jiashu blocked her, determined not to let her go without the truth. She and Ji sighed, knowing how stubborn he could be. All right, I'll tell you. Just don't tell my mom, or I'm dead. I got into a fight. Because of me? Zhou Jiashu asked bluntly. She and Ji's face heated up, and she denied it immediately. Stop flattering yourself. I just couldn't stand by and do nothing. I was being a hero, taking down a villain. She trailed off as Zhou Jiashu stared at her with, I'll just quietly wait for you to stop lying expression. She and Ji gave up. Fine, I admit it, but you can just pretend nothing happened. I just couldn't swallow my anger. And don't get too emotional. I just can't stand anyone bullying you. My only worry now is if this leaves a scar, I might not be able to get married. Zhou Jiashu quietly looked down at the girl, a head shorter than him, her soft hair covering the swollen eye, and her face full of concern. He blurted out, Don't worry. As soon as he said it, he turned and walked away. She and Ji stared after him, confused by his words. She had no idea what he meant. But Zhou Jiashu walked faster and faster, his face inexplicably heating up, ignoring the hey calls from behind him. She and Ji, a large butterfly-like figure floated toward her. Did you know, Zhou Jiashu was absolutely amazing today. What? Did he outsmart you again? She and Ji wondered if Shinju was a masochist. Not this time. Shinju paused dramatically, but seeing that her listener wasn't the least bit curious, she couldn't hold it in anymore. This time it was Shen Jianan. Zhou Jiashu came to our class today. At first, I thought he came to see me, got me all excited for nothing. Did he fight? Hearing Shen Jianan's name, Qi and Ji tensed up. She only relaxed when Shinju shook her head. No, but today was the first time in my life I witnessed what it truly means to defeat someone without lifting a finger. Shinju's eyes sparkled with admiration. You know what he said? Zhou Jiashu stood there, super cool, and said to Shen Jianan, Dare to bully my woman and I'll wipe you out in seconds. Sis, you've watched too many dramas. You made that up, didn't you? Qi and Ji calmly looked at Shinju, calling her out on her blatant lie. Shinju burst into laughter. You know him too well. Okay, fine, I said that. But Zhou Jiashu was definitely cool. Shen Jianan isn't even as tall as him, and Zhou Jiashu just towered over him with this imposing aura. And everyone in the class heard it when he said, Next time, don't get the author's name wrong when you copy answers. The author of The Pavilion of Princeton is Wang Bo, not with the water radical. Shen Jianan's face turned all sorts of colors. I think Zhou Jiashu knew exactly what he was doing, especially since he said it just as Zhong Qiqi walked into the classroom. What a sly fox. Qi and Ji imagined the scene and couldn't help but smile. It seemed Zhou Jiashu did know how to show gratitude. Ever since Zhou Jiashu humiliated Shen Jianan in front of the whole class, Qi and Ji had been living on edge. When Shen Jianan punched her in the face, he hadn't held back at all. When she ambushed him from behind with her backpack, she was banking on the hope that boys wouldn't hit girls. It would be too embarrassing. But to her surprise, after Shen Jianan fell off his bike from the impact, the first thing he did when he got up was grab Qi and Ji and punch her in the eye. It hurt so much, she nearly cried on the spot. Qi and Ji spent the next few days in fear, while Zhou Jiashu remained as calm as ever. But soon, her fear was washed away by the joy of the upcoming holiday. The whole class shifted from being tense to rowdy and excited. Qi and Ji leaned over to Zhou Jiashu and poked his arm with her pen. Zhou Jiashu, Shinju, and I are planning to go hiking during the break. Are you coming? Zhou Jiashu turned to see her bright, expectant eyes, and the no that was on the tip of his tongue became okay. Okay? What's that supposed to mean? Hiking is supposed to be fun, but you look like you're being forced into it. Qianji, your use of idioms is quite vivid. Zhou Jiashu concisely summed up. The sun was bright, and the wind rustled through the forest as the mountain air felt especially fresh and invigorating. Xi Ange followed behind Zhou Jiashu, watching as he climbed the mountain with ease while she was already out of breath. Zhou Jiashu, can you slow down a bit? She gasped. Zhou Jiashu glanced back and saw that Xi Ange had fallen behind. He came back, smiling slightly. My long legs make me faster. Your short legs make you slower. You can't blame me for that. Zhou Jiashu, do you have any idea how much I want to beat you up sometimes? Xi Ange said through gritted teeth. Zhou Jiashu glanced at her. With your height and stamina, I kindly advise against attempting such high-risk moves. Xi Ange felt like she must have done something terribly wrong in a past life to deserve being stuck with Zhou Jiashu in this one. Can you still keep going? If I can't, will you carry me? Xi Ange snapped, but to her surprise, Zhou Jiashu crouched down right in front of her. Offering help for no reason means you're either up to no good or plotting something. Forget it, let's go. Shinju and the others are probably at the top by now. Xi Ange extended her hand to pull him up, but Zhou Jiashu smoothly stood up before she could. You're the one who didn't want me to carry you, so don't blame me for not taking care of you. Hey, Zhou Jiashu, you're such a schemer. You knew I wouldn't actually let you carry me and just pretended to be considerate, didn't you? Zhou Jiashu gave her a look, his face clearly saying, you got it? Finally, they reached the summit, where the view was breathtaking. Xi Ange looked at the rolling mountains in the distance and turned to Zhou Jiashu with a smile. Nice view. Huh? Better than your iron oxide, isn't it? Shinju, who had arrived earlier, ran over excitedly and gave Xi Ange a bear hug. Ange, let's stay up here and wait for the sunrise. Instinctively, Xi Ange glanced at Zhou Jiashu. Seeing that he didn't object, she nodded at Shinju. The temperature at the top of the mountain dropped dramatically at night. Xi Ange huddled close to Zhou Jiashu, but still shivered uncontrollably. Why is it so cold? I should have brought that army coat. You deserve it for thinking the army coat was ugly. Freeze to death for all I care. Zhou Jiashu's words were as cold as the temperature on the mountain. Xi Ange looked up, ready to retort, but in the next moment, she found herself in a warm embrace. By the time she realized it was Zhou Jiashu holding her, all her words of rebuttal melted away into silence. Warmer now. Zhou Jiashu's low voice came from above. Xi Ange nodded in his arms. After a while, she looked up at his firm jawline. Zhou Jiashu, where do you plan to go for college? I don't care. What does that mean? Xi Ange found it hard to understand the academic genius before her. I'd like to go to Hangzhou. A simple, curt response. Xi Ange suddenly realized that with Zhou Jiashu's grades, he'd definitely choose the best school available. They had been together from kindergarten through elementary, middle, and high school. After the college entrance exams, they might go their separate ways. The chances of just looking up and seeing each other like they had before would become rare. Xi Ange tightened her grip around Zhou Jiashu's waist. Zhou Jiashu's body stiffened slightly at the unexpected move. He looked down at the person in his arms, but then heard her softly murmur, so warm. A slight smile crept onto Zhou Jiashu's face as his lips brushed against Xi Ange's hair. His voice barely audible, he said, wherever you go, I'll go too. After the holiday, the entire class entered a state of heightened tension. Every time Xi Ange looked up, she saw Zhou Jiashu's slender back, a quiet presence that always made her feel warm inside, like the gentle stirrings of spring water. Finally, the exams were over, and now came the anxious wait for the results. When Xi Ange checked her scores, the first thing she did was call Zhou Jiashu. His crisp voice came through the phone. Your score is good enough for Hangzhou. Xi Ange's heart raced. Yeah, I finally got my wish. She held tightly to the secret buried deep in her heart, suppressing the overwhelming urge to spill it all, something she could barely control, as her friend Shinju had once teased her. Afterward, she happily went on a trip with her parents, her heart filled with sweet nervousness. Every time she thought of Zhou Jiashu's handsome face, she couldn't help but smile. Once she had settled in at school, Qi Ange, bursting with excitement, dialed the familiar number. But the phone rang for a long time with no answer. All day long, she kept her phone in hand, constantly checking it, afraid to miss any message or call. At one point, she even suspected her phone was broken. She asked a classmate to call her number, and only after hearing her ringtone play did she feel reassured. After dinner, her phone finally rang. She quickly took it out, only to see the caller ID show Mom. Mom, what's up? Can I call you without a reason? Why do you sound so disappointed? What's wrong? Not getting used to school? Her mother asked on the other end. Qi Ange's nose stung, and her voice choked up. It's nothing, Mom. I just really miss home. For the first time in her life, Qi Ange understood what it meant to feel utterly alone. In a strange city, speaking an unfamiliar dialect, not only did she miss home, but she missed that slender figure even more. Sigh. That's what you get for choosing a school so far away. The winters there are freezing. Look at Zhou Jiashu. He knew better and chose somewhere closer to home. Mom, where did Zhou Jiashu end up going? Qi Ange finally heard the name she longed to hear. I heard from his mom that he went to Hangzhou. His family wanted him to apply to Beijing, but he refused. Eventually, his mom stopped pushing him. After all, he's their only son, and Hangzhou isn't too far. A loud hum filled Qi Ange's mind. She suddenly remembered that night on the mountaintop when she told Zhou Jiashu she wanted to go to Hangzhou. But she had never wanted to be separated from Zhou Jiashu by such a great distance, which is why she had worked so hard to get into a university in Beijing. She recalled how, when they were little, lying on the floor together, staring at the map of China, Zhou Jiashu had pointed at the heart of the rooster and said, "Little dove, I'm definitely going to study here someday. It has the most beautiful autumn." But now, she was in Beijing, while he had gone to Hangzhou. When Qi Ange saw Zhou Jiashu, her tears fell uncontrollably. Zhou Jiashu, are you really that foolish? So this is what it feels like to reunite with an old acquaintance. Qi Ange's empty soul finally felt full and content. Zhou Jiashu looked a little stunned. When she called him, she had only said, "I want to see you." He never expected that she would really travel all the way from Beijing to Hangzhou. After a long while, Qi Ange felt a pair of hands gently wrap around her shoulders, the warm embrace just like the old days. "Stop crying. You look pretty ugly when you cry," Zhou Jiashu said softly. Qi Ange lifted her tear-filled eyes and gazed at his handsome face. "Zhou Jiashu, why didn't you tell me earlier?" Zhou Jiashu wiped the tears from her face with his hand. "Because I knew that we'd end up together, sooner or later." Then he added, "After graduation, come to Beijing." Shen Zhu was the first person to find out they were together, and she teased her over the phone. "I knew you two had something going on. I saw it with my sharp eyes. Zhou Jiashu definitely had ulterior motives for you." "Oh wait, no. It was you who had ulterior motives for my male god. Your Chinese is terrible. That's not called ulterior motives, it's called mutual feelings. Get lost, you little brat. I'll kick over this bowl of dog food," Shen Zhu grumbled on the other end. Qi Ange had a small box, filled with her treasures, namely, a thick stack of train tickets. Her roommates always said that by traveling back and forth so much, she would spoil her boyfriend. She would just smile and stay quiet because she knew her boyfriend was the best in the world. It didn't matter what others thought. In an online video chat with Shen Zhu, Qi Ange said, "Sister Shen, I have a secret to tell you. I might get married as soon as I graduate." Shen Zhu laughed loudly and immediately corrected her. "You mean graduate and then get married, right? Come on, don't sell yourself short. Did the male god propose? He's so affectionate. Hurry and tell me all the details. Where did he propose? I need specifics." "Where?" Qi Ange's face heated up, and she quickly said, "Every place you can imagine." Shen Zhu shrieked through the video, "Too much dog food. I'm choking on it." After ending the video call, Qi Ange thought to herself, if Shen Zhu knew what happened in bed, she'd probably imagine all sorts of X-rated scenarios in her mind. In early November, Qianji and Zhou Jiashu went to Fenghuang ancient town together. The next day, it started pouring rain. While it poured outside, Zhou Jiashu calmly returned to the room to take a nap. Qianji stood by the window snacking on sunflower seeds as the rain kept falling harder and harder. Bored, she sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. Suddenly, she saw a durian on the table. She quickly turned off the TV, picked up the durian, held her breath, and began peeling it. Holding half of the durian, she walked over to Zhou Jiashu. Kneeling on the bed, she held the durian just 2 centimeters from Zhou Jiashu's nose and waited, enduring the overwhelming stench. What the? Zhou Jiashu opened his eyes and was immediately hit by the pungent smell, making him curse involuntarily. Qianji doubled over in laughter. 3 minutes. Zhou Jiashu slapped the durian out of her hand and sat up, grabbing her by the neck. Qianji, you actually timed it? Qianji tried to pry his hands from her neck, but Zhou Jiashu pinned her wrists down beside her body. His face was so close, their noses nearly touched. Her face flushed red. Their eyes met, and in Qianji's clear, innocent gaze was a hint of shyness. Zhou Jiashu leaned in and kissed her soft, rosy lips. After a long moment, Zhou Jiashu pulled away and gazed at her with deep sincerity. Little dove, after we graduate, let's get married. When they left Fenghuang, Qianji saw a crimson-colored envelope in a small shop and immediately fell in love with it. This is the kind of envelope I want for our wedding invitations. It should say, Eternal Love. Qianji called Lu Jingyun and succinctly explained her upcoming plans. Lu Jingyun exclaimed, Old Qi, the company is swamped right now. How did you even get time off? Don't tell me you got fired. You got the idea, but I fired the company, Qianji replied calmly, a stark contrast to Lu Jingyun's excitement, as if she wasn't the one leaving. Old Qi, you're amazing. You're almost 30 and still have the guts to be reckless like a young girl. Well done. If things don't work out in Beijing, come back to Guangzhou. I've got your back. Lu Jingyun's dramatic loyalty made Qianji laugh. All right, I'll hold you to that. She knew she wouldn't return. She never liked Guangzhou anyway. She had originally come here because she thought that by distancing herself from Zhou Jiashu, maybe, over time, she'd forget about him. After hanging up, Qianji opened her laptop to book a train ticket. Her desktop background was a sketch of a girl wearing a straw hat, holding a cotton candy, smiling brilliantly in the sunlight. I want cotton candy. Buy it for me. Sooner or later, you'll turn into cotton candy. The boy had grumbled with a stern face, but he still handed over the cotton candy. She stared at the screen for a long time before finally booking a ticket, but not to Beijing. When she got off the train, Qianji's feet touched the familiar ground. The noisy crowd buzzed around her, and the streets were lined with the garish trappings of modern prosperity. She took a deep breath, but her heart felt heavy. Her happiest memories were here, but so were her most painful. This place had become her nightmare, something she avoided at all costs. The little stalls that once lined the streets were gone, replaced by towering skyscrapers. Even Yonghe High School's gate had been replaced with a sleek, retractable one. The entrance was spotless. Qianji looked around the school entrance, but couldn't find the old man who used to sell cotton candy. Time changes everything. After she and Zhou Jiashu left this place, she went north and he went south, yet Qianji often felt they were close, even though they were apart. But later, even though they were both in Beijing, she knew that the distance between them had become insurmountable. Zhou Jiashu submitted his resume directly to Beijing after graduation. It was 2012, the rumored apocalypse looming, causing widespread anxiety. However, Qi Engdi was occupied by another matter. Zhou Jiashu had bought her a ring, and they had even set a wedding date. She awaited the day with eager anticipation. Yet, instead of joy, she received devastating news. When Qi Engdi rushed to Zhou Jiashu's home, the sight before her was shrouded in mourning. Zhou's mother knelt before the ice coffin, crying heart-wrenchingly, while Zhou Jiashu knelt beside her, his head bowed, hiding his expression. His gaunt figure pierced her eyes painfully. She dashed forward, wanting to comfort the heartbroken Zhou mother, but to her shock, Zhou's mother suddenly let out a piercing scream upon seeing her. "Leave! I don't want to see you." Her cries cut through the air like a sharp blade, stabbing at Qi Engi's heart. Qi Engi's hand awkwardly hung in the air, and then she saw Zhou Jiashu stand up and walk toward her. His dark eyes fixed on her, silent yet filled with endless coldness, even a hint of hatred. Zhou Jiashu. Qi Engi had never seen him like this before and timidly called his name. "Don't call me. I don't want to see you." His voice was as cold as ice. Qi Engi looked at the boy who had turned his back to her, tears streaming down her face, silently. Hesitantly, she turned and left. That evening, she brought a bowl of soup her mother made to the Zhou household. But before she could say a word, Zhou Jiashu swiped the bowl from her hands, scalding soup splattering onto her skin. With a face of indifference, he clearly stated, "I told you I don't want to see you. Our family doesn't want to see you. Don't show up in front of me again." It felt like an eternity as Qi Engi stood frozen, unable to move. When he saw she had no intention of leaving, he forcefully shoved her. Qi Engi stumbled, hitting the edge of a table, pain washing over her, leaving her face pale. Zhou's mother, witnessing her daughter's pale face and knowing she must have hurt herself but biting her tongue in silence, softened her heart. "Engi, I know this isn't your fault, but your dad shouldn't have left after the accident. Please go home. Don't come back." With tears blurring her vision, Qi Engi looked at the woman who suddenly seemed so aged, her once warm home now in ruins. For the first time, she felt hatred. She hated that driver for being her father. Why didn't he take Uncle Zhou to the hospital immediately after the accident? Why did he choose to flee instead? After the funeral, Zhou Jiashu returned to Beijing. Watching the increasingly silent Zhou Jiashu, Qi Engi felt for the first time that words were the most useless thing in the world. The person she loved so deeply was now in so much pain, and she felt helpless, forced to watch him drown in sorrow. As autumn winds blew, she received a call from her mother in December, asking her to come home. When she stepped into her home and saw the ice coffin, she felt a surreal sense of time reversing. Half a month ago, it was Zhou Jiashu's father lying there. Now it was her own father. She had once hated him with a passion, yet now he returned to her, lying there in silence. On that rainy day, the mountain roads were slippery, and her father had panicked, slipping and falling. By the time the body was discovered, it had already bloated from being submerged in water. One morning, Qi Engi went to her mother's room to call her for breakfast. She shook the person on the bed, but after a long moment, there was no response. Seeing the blood-soaked half of the sheets, the horrifying red chilled her to the bone. She screamed, "Mom!" Qi Engi collapsed to the floor, unable to believe that in a single night, she had lost both her parents and no longer had a home. After a long time, she dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang for what felt like an eternity before someone picked up. There was silence on the other end. Holding her phone tightly as if it were her last lifeline, she whispered, "Zhou Jiashu, get lost." His cold voice poured over her like a bucket of icy water. Qi Engi was speechless, listening to the busy signal echoing through the receiver, her gaze vacant. That night, she sat on the cold floor for the entire night, watching over 2 ice coffins. As the autumn breeze brushed against her, Qi Engi shivered involuntarily. She wiped her face with her hand, the wind soon drying the traces of her tears. Tomorrow was Zhou Jiashu's wedding. Sitting on the bus to Beijing, she tapped her forehead and thought, "Don't be too greedy, Engi. Just receiving an invitation is a great grace. You must smile and offer your blessings. Why cry?" Her phone vibrated in her pocket, but Qi Engi didn't notice until she pulled it out to check the time, discovering several missed calls from Shinju. She wanted to return a call, but as she clicked on Shinju's contact, she swayed and bumped her head against the seat in front. The phone flew from her hands, landing beneath the seat. Bending down to retrieve her phone, she suddenly felt a weight on her, as if the luggage above was tumbling down on her. In an instant, The world spun around her amid the screeching brakes and cries, engulfing her in chaos. She found herself pinned under a pile of luggage, trying to reach for her throbbing head but to no avail. Her vision blurred as the once raging world fell silent. In that silence, she saw Zhou Jiashu's face, dressed in a blue shirt, the boy with exquisite features smiling gently at her. "Little dove, just be happy by my side. Leave the rest to me." Outside, medical staff in white coats moved swiftly through the accident scene, surrounded by groans and heart-wrenching cries. Meanwhile, 50 kilometers away from the accident site, there was a festive atmosphere in Beijing. "Oh, wow. You went to such great lengths just to surprise her? Your skills at creating romantic scenarios are truly unmatched," a woman's voice bubbled with excitement. "Shenju, what time is it? I need to go pick her up from the station." The man's handsome brow furrowed, revealing his impatience. Shenju laughed. "You're really that eager? And Gush should be arriving soon. I'll drive you there." Grabbing the car keys, Shenju headed out. "Good thing you warned me in advance. She came to ask me who the bride was after receiving your blank invitation. It took a lot of effort to keep it from her. When she realizes she's the bride, she'll probably be overwhelmed with joy. Make sure you're ready to catch her." Shenju glanced at the person beside her and timidly said, "You know, after that incident back then, I thought you two were done for. It's a pity, really." Zhou Jiashu stiffened in the passenger seat, the atmosphere in the car suddenly awkward. Regretting her choice of words, Shenju was about to say something when Zhou Jiashu unexpectedly spoke up. "I thought so too. But life is too long, and she's too unforgettable. Wow, I didn't know your romantic skills were so advanced. Hold on tight. I'm speeding up." In truth, Zhou Jiashu hadn't slept well for years. He still had the last phone call Qian Ge made to him saved in his phone, but before that call, he had no idea of her situation. At her most desperate moment, he had cruelly told her to get lost. When he finally learned the truth and tried to call her back, he could never get through. He asked all his friends, but couldn't find any news about her. In that moment, he realized how vast the world was, so vast that he had lost her without even noticing. He remembered how timid she was as a child. She would jump into his arms at the sight of a mouse and hide in his embrace during thunderstorms. Back then, his mother often joked that she would one day marry into the Zhou family because she was so attached to him. If it hadn't been for that incident, perhaps they would already have children in kindergarten by now. Every time Zhou Jiashu thought of his little dove being all alone in this world, without anyone to rely on, it felt like a knife was twisting in his heart. Fortunately, Shenju eventually gave him her contact information, and as he stared at the address and that familiar phone number, tears welled in his eyes. He hadn't changed his number all these years because he was afraid his little dove wouldn't be able to find him. What he didn't know was that she had kept that number all along as well. There was another joyous occasion to celebrate, one that could be termed a reunion after loss. Thankfully, he still had a lifetime to make up for those lost years and to soothe her troubled soul. Zhou Jiashu took out his phone, eager to dial that number, longing to hear the voice that haunted his dreams. Meanwhile, in a corner of a severely damaged bus, 50 kilometers away, music suddenly played. The screen lit up, clearly displaying the name Zhou Jiashu. The phone sang quietly, but no one pressed the answer key.